This part of Herodotus is a beautiful illustration of the word seimainen, in the sense of sending a message, sending a signal, but at the same time sending a signal about the tomb of a hero. So in this context of the verb seimainen, which you could translate as mean or have meaning, you see that the meaning is primarily the meaning of the tomb of a hero. And just as sema has a surface meaning and then an underneath the surface meaning, so also the word Tarīkhos has a surface meaning and an underneath the surface meaning, and the surface meaning seems very everyday. It's preserved fish. And I'm deliberately saying preserved fish because we don't think of what preserved really means when we say preserved fish. We immediately think of pickled fish, smoked fish, salted fish. In modern terms, sardines and a sardine can. There's so many ways we think of it that are not exalted. But clearly here, we are led to understand that the miracle of preserved fish coming alive in a skillet while they're being cooked takes us from the world of the everyday to a very deep world. Earlier I said exalted world. I can use both metaphors. It's both very high, very deep. But this other world of the hero. And after all, it's Herodotus himself who in Book 2 of his history talks about plans A, B, and C for the preparation of mummies. And the most deluxe way of preparing mummies involves, again, this word, Tarīkhos, and it involves the Egyptian myth ritual complex of how Osiris, O-S-I-R-I-S, who is, shall we say, the first dead mortal, becomes the first resurrected mortal by virtue of being mummified. So the ritual of mummification is tied together with the myth of the resurrection of Osiris. And this beautiful myth ritual complex is a comfortable way for Herodotus to think about cult heroes who themselves die in a mystical way and then, more important, are resurrected in a mystical way, which is forbidden to talk about in most everyday situations. Easiest way for Herodotus to handle it is to talk about Egyptian myth and ritual because there are no taboos for a Greek-speaking person. I think also of Plutarch in the 2nd century CE, who, let's face it, was a priest of Apollo at Delphi. Right. What could be more important? Wouldn't we love to interview Plutarch about his role as a priest of Apollo at Delphi? And aren't we disappointed when we see what Plutarch actually publishes about his theological sensibilities? I think of 2 works in particular. There's an essay that he produced about the epsilon in Delphi. And it's so mystical that most of us specialists don't know where to start with that. And then the other one is his essay on the cult of Isis and Osiris, where he really gets theological and you really start appreciating, ah yes, this is a priest of Apollo at Delphi speaking. But still, he's not going to tell you about the theology of Apollo directly. He's going to talk about the theology of Osiris and his consort Isis. And I'd be very happy to share with the participants my notes. I have an informal commentary on Plutarch's Isis and Osiris, which some people might like to read in the context of this particular reference to the resurrection of cult heroes after death, as expressed in wording that's more suitable for Egyptian mummies, where when a dead person is mummified, the hope is that by way of this ritual, the myth of Osiris can be reenacted. And just as Osiris in myth is resurrected after death by virtue of being the first mummified mortal, so also the person who dies in the historical present of Egypt, shall we say, and the person who then is mummified will, in some unspecified time and place in the future, likewise achieve a resurrection that is parallel to the resurrection of Osiris. So it's easier to say it that way, and actually it's appropriate to say it this way if you use the word say my name, which is not direct communication, it's communication through coded messages. And such messages can only be understood by those people who know the code, that is to say, who are mentally, morally, and emotionally predisposed to understanding.
And it might have multiple meanings.
And definitely has multiple meanings, because if you're going to be superficial, you're going to go for the easy meaning. And if you're going to be deep, then you'll go for the meaning that is encoded to be understood as a mystery.
Maybe you talk about this later on in this chapter, but there's also the Lycian hero, right?
You know, I never do, but we could say that I would love to share with the participants a discussion, an analysis of a character in Homeric poetry, Sarpedon, who gets a funeral that's very different from other funerals because of a special word that is used, which is indirectly related to the word Tarīkhos. And what we can do is simply post it maybe, and if anybody would like to read the research on that, it would make me very happy.